You're watching EAC News. Thanks for joining us. June 4th marks the 33rd anniversary of the government crackdown on pro-democracy demonstrators in Beijing's Tiananmen Square. For the first time since Beijing implemented the national security rule on Hong Kong in 2020, no political groups or religious groups, among other organizations, have signaled any intention to hold an annual commemoration of the incident.
The group that had organized the annual vigil in Hong Kong's Victoria's Park for more than 3 decades decided to disband in 2021 in response to increased scrutiny by authorities. Many of its leaders and several prominent Hong Kong activists, including Joshua Wong, Chow Hang-tun, and Cheuk-yan, are currently serving prison sentences for various crimes. The government has never released a death toll of the June 4, 1989 crackdown, but estimates from human rights groups and witnesses range from several hundred to several thousand. China slid into economic chaos in 1988 with panic buying triggered by rising inflation, peaking at more than 30% in cities. Public discontent, coupled with the death of purged reform-minded Communist Party leader Hu Yaobang on April 15, 1989, set the stage for the demonstrations. More than 1 million people flooded into central Beijing, keen to vent their anger against corruption, economic mismanagement, nepotism, and poor career prospects for students. Gathering in Tiananmen Square, the students erected their own goddess of democracy status opposite the official portrait of the communist revolutionary leader chairman Mao Zedong. After weeks of protests in the square, troops backed by tanks crushed the demonstrations, prompting global condemnation. The footage of a lone protester standing in front of a line of tanks has become one of the most powerful symbols of the 20th century. Chinese leaders denounced the demonstrations as a counter-revolutionary movement, and the ensuing flurry of arrests, executions, and exiles frightened many demonstrators into silence. In 2009, a reformist Chinese leader Zhao Ziyang broke the official silence on the 1989 Tiananmen crackdown, denouncing the killings of protesters as a tragedy and recorded memoirs released 4 years after his death. On the 30th anniversary in 2019, China Defense Minister Wei Fenghe, in a rare acknowledgement of the bloody crackdown, said it was the correct decision which led to a stable country since then. It is rare for Chinese government officials to acknowledge the events of June 4, 1989. References to it are heavily censored in China. The event remains a taboo topic of discussion in mainland China and will not be officially commemorated by the ruling Communist Party or government. Here are some landmark dates leading up to the demonstration and the crackdown that followed. 1988, China slides into economic chaos with panic buying triggered by rising inflation that neared 30%. April 15, 1989, a leading reformer and former Communist Party chief Hu Yaobang dies. His death acts as a catalyst for unhappiness with the slow pace of reform as well as corruption and income inequality. April 17th, a protest begins at Tiananmen Square with students calling for democracy and reform. Crowds of up to 100,000 gather despite official warnings. April 22nd, some 50,000 students gather outside the Great Hall of the People as Hu's memorial service is held. 3 students attempt to deliver a petition to the government outlining their demands but are ignored. Rioting and looting take place in Xi'an and Changsha. April 24th, Beijing students begin classroom strike. April 27th, around 50,000 students defy authorities and march to Tiananmen, supporting crowds number up to 1 million. May 2nd, in Shanghai, 10,000 protesters marched city government headquarters. May 4th, further mass protests coinciding with the anniversary of the May 4th movement of 1919, which was another student and intellectual-led movement for reform. Protests coincide with meeting of Asian Development Bank in Great Hall of the People. Students marched in Shanghai and 9 other cities. May 13th, hundreds of students began a hunger strike on Tiananmen Square. May 15th to the 18th, to China's embarrassment, protests prevent traditional welcome ceremony outside the Great Hall of the People for the state visit of reformist Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. Students welcomed Gorbachev as the ambassador of democracy. May 19th, party chief Zhao Ziyang visits students on Tiananmen Square, accompanied by the hardline then Premier Li Peng and future Premier Wang Zhibao. Zhao pleads with the students protesters to leave but is ignored. It is the last time Zhao is seen in public. He is later purged. May 20th, Li declares martial law in parts of Beijing, revived by many to this day as the Butcher of Beijing. Li remained premier until 1998. May 23rd, some 100,000 people marched in Beijing demanding demanding Li's removal. May 30th, students unveiled the 10-meter-high Goddess of Democracy modeled on a Statue of Liberty in Tiananmen Square. May 31st, government-sponsored counter-demonstration calls students treacherous bandits. June 3rd, citizens repel a charge towards Tiananmen by thousands of soldiers, tear gas and bullets used in running clashes a few hundred meters from the square. Authorities warn protesters that troops and police have the right to use all methods. June 4th, in the early hours of the morning, tanks and armored personnel carriers begin their attack on the square itself, clearing it by dawn. About 4 hours later, troops fired on unarmed civilians regrouping at the edge of the square. June 5th, an unidentified Chinese man stands in front of a tank convoy, leaving Tiananmen Square. The image spreads around the world as a symbol of defiance against the crackdown. June 6th, Chinese State Council spokesman Wang Mu says on television that the known death toll was about 300, most of them soldiers, with only 23 students confirmed killed. China has never provided a full death toll, but rights groups and witnesses said the figure could run into the thousands. June 9th, Paramount leader Deng Xiaoping praises military officers and blames the protests on counter-revolutionary seeking to overthrow the parties.
之后，改革将如何发展？世界的目光再一次聚集到了总设计师邓小平的身上。